guys see AOC get heckled?
I did.
Believe it or not, I actually had completely missed this. I'm just like, oh, it's LaRouche. I'm out.
All right. Well, yeah. Let's so set this up for us, David. Who are these people?
I mean, you've been around a bit longer than me, that you might be able to give folks a better history of LaRouche. But like for folks who like don't know who LaRouche is, I'll do my best to take you through it. I mean, LaRouche sort of starts out at a certain period of time talking a bit like a Marxist and like he's doing some kind of new synthesis. But very quickly, he starts tailing the right and effectively creates like a far right. And I'm not one of these people who uses these terminologies loosely. Like far right, fairly fascist movement that sort of sometimes would paint itself as like fighting for the workers or for revolution. But he saw the world as a fight between Platonists and Aristotelians, if I'm getting that right, Ben. Which is
just awesome to start with. Like that's yeah. No, that really explains it. Like I want to I kind of want to break it all down now, right? Be like, okay, so Biden played Mr. Aristotelian. Jeff Bezos played Aristotelian. Chris Smalls played Mr. Aristotelian. But yeah, that is a very reasonable way to classify everybody in the modern world. But please,
oh no, and just like I mean, like we could maybe talk more about LaRouche in a minute. I'm sure we should. But like these folks who are doing this are affiliated with a group called the Schiller Institute, if I'm getting that right, which is like a LaRouche organization. So it's not just like, oh, like these people like sometimes have praised this person. It's like, no, these people are coming out of that movement. One quick thing about LaRouche too, just like there's the far right thing. I mean, there's credible accusations about them being involved in a murder of a young Jewish man. I mean, like this isn't just like, oh, these guys have crazy ideas. They've attacked left-wing protesters before. This goes beyond just like some people saying bad things to also like doing really horrific stuff. I bring that all up because I don't want to trivialize it by also noting some of the funnier beliefs too that you get from LaRouche. I'm no like opera expert, but there's this controversy about the way that modern opera is sung, the pitch that it's in, that LaRouche and some other like classicists like think that it's like a huge deviation from like the traditional style of this music. And like a big part of the playing has also been to like return proper pitch to opera, which I think is very funny. And they've also at times have gotten like famous opera singers like in Italy to come and like record videos in support of returning the pitch, with these Italian opera singers having no idea the group that they're like associating themselves with. And I think that like we need to find a really good Byzantine line in the sand for the left movement today to really hold on, in addition to like Green New Deal, Medicare for all. No more Traegers, like no more Traeger grills. We believe that barbecue should be done properly on a stick burner. But like, yeah. Anyway, I mean, like we should play the clip, let it speak for itself. But if I were to make any preface to this, like there is definitely a lot of space. Like I'm somebody who's most of the time when I'm talking about AOC, it's making the point of criticizing where she's sort of out of not in step with like the left movement. But I think it's really important to recognize where these things are coming from, because like we can make criticisms of like AOC and the squad when it comes to decisions that they've made. I think that what's being presented here is a little bit outlandish and not very fair. But like what's been frustrating about this clip, because it's been on Fox News and all this kind of stuff now, and all those people are like, well, I don't care where it's coming from. They speak the truth. They speak the truth. It's like, no, you don't have to. You don't have to hand it to the far right to be anti-war. Like there is a base, any position that you can take without saying like, yeah, LaRouchites are cool in my book. But anyway.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, I guess to fill out a little bit of that. So Lyndon LaRouche, I guess he started out in the Communist Party way back when, and then he was a Trotskyist for a while. And he started. It's like the National Committee of Labor Caucus or something like that. It was called, but it was like his own little front organization. and then he decided that the existing left was the big impediment to the revolution happening in like the 70s sometime, and he did this thing called Operation Mop Up, which involved actually physically attacking people in the streets, and then he went way to the right, and then he kind of sort of came back, but not really. Like, still had like a lot of very socially conservative positions, but he like talk about the New Deal is a good thing. And yeah, I think the original thing way back when he was still some sort of Marxist is that he decided that the revolutionary vanguard also needed to be a cultural vanguard, hence the opera stuff and all of that. And he'd also have a bunch of conspiracy theories that all involved like the Federal Reserve, like international drug dealers, and the Queen of England. Queen Elizabeth was always part of this, just to fund his own. So yeah, they're challenging here AOC on Ukraine positions, and look, as you say, I've expressed public disagreement with her on some of this stuff. I wrote an article for Current Affairs that congressional progressives need to do better in foreign policy, and I think there are legitimate grounds for criticism. I think. Let's just play this and people can decide for themselves whether this falls into that category.
And so there are so many members of our community who may be deaf, hard of hearing, or have physical disabilities that prevent them from getting all the way over here. We don't want to exclude them from participation in our public processes. So our question, Angela, was the question, how do we get young people with disabilities to become more engaged?
All right, I feel like I'm not giving the insanity it's due here. We're going to switch to a different video. I'm actually glad we started with this one because you can a little bit of context that you don't get if you get the video that's like basically filmed from right behind them.
Yeah, no, actually, you're right, because it does sort of show what the vibes were like there for everyone watching.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, let's switch. And it also shows, by the way, it's a very small issue, but since this is going to come up, it also shows that like they were actually trying to read another question they already got. Mm-hmm. And so what these people are actually doing is like stepping on a question from like a disabled person who couldn't ask it the other way. So, where, and they sort of brush that off as like being evasive. But like I said, it's not the most important thing going on here, but it is maybe worth noting. But yeah, let's switch to the other video. Here we go.
None of this matters unless there's a nuclear war, which you voted to send arms and weapons to Ukraine. Tulsi Gabbard, she's left the Democratic Party because they're okay? You originally voted, you ran as an outsider, yet you've been voting to start this war in Ukraine. You're voting to start a thermonuclear war with Russia and China. Why are you playing with the lives of American citizens? You're playing with our lives.
There will be no neighbors if there's a nuclear bomb. You voted to mobilize and send money to Ukrainian Nazis. You're a coward. You're a progressive socialist. Where are you against the war mobilization? He's telling the right truth. You have done nothing. Tulsi Gabbard has shown guts where you've shown cowardice. I believed in you, and you became the very thing you sought to fight against. That's what you've become. You are the establishment, and you are the reason why everybody will end up in a nuclear war unless you choose to stand up right now and denounce the Democratic Party. Will you do that? Yes or no? Okay, simple. Are you going to stop nuclear war? Yes or no? There is no line, because this is bullshit. None of this matters if we're all dead. None of it. You know that. Then let's take it up right now, because this is the only thing that matters. This is the only thing that matters right now. We could be in a nuclear war at any minute, and you continue to fund it. That's what's going on. Why not right now? You're the liar here. Nobody has held you accountable. That's what's happening. And it is time for you to stand up and realize that what you've been saying has been lies. Let your conscience come through for once.
Well, I gotta say, I'm a little disappointed. I was hoping for space lasers and gold standard issues, but
yeah, no, just a very normal constituent, very upset that AOC is personally starting a nuclear war.
Yeah, the third nuclear war too, I might add.
Yeah, I didn't know about the first two.
Yeah, I'm assuming World War II was one of them, but I don't know where the second one would be.
All right, so I guess I want to kick this off by asking David, are you going to stop the nuclear war? Yes or no?
I'm trying. I mean, like, look, there's two conversations that you can have in response to this, right? One is about the United States providing military aid to Ukraine, right? Yeah. And the other is like doing what they're doing, which like I think it's like, I'm not trying to make nitpicky points, but like, why, if this is just a genuine criticism of AOC, is there all this damn talk about a former congressperson, Tulsi Gabbard, former presidential candidate? Like, you know what I mean? Like, there's like an op aspect to this where there has been this push over the past couple of weeks. It's sort of, I mean, it's not been just over the past couple of weeks, but Tulsi Gabbard put out her big, like, why I'm leaving the left and leaving the Democratic Party video, aloha, thing that just came out. And you've seen a lot of these figures from whatever we want to call that movement really trying to bolster up Tulsi. And I think it's important to recognize that there are some aspects of this. You know, the thing about, yeah, and please do, the thing about like the aid to Ukraine is that not getting into like a debate about whether or not we should be funding or sending any level of military aid to Ukraine. What she's being accused of is actually very mild in like the grand scheme of things, in the grand scheme of the political fights that are happening about Russia's invasion of Ukraine. We're talking about smaller packages, mostly humanitarian, with some level of like logistical aid to like the Ukrainian military, right? Again, like if you want to have that fight, I think it's sort of beyond the purview of this conversation, but fine, right? But the thing that like AOC is behind the saber rattling around war is ludicrous, especially if you go and read, like the right wing is very split on this now, by the way, about whether or not they liked it, the war in Ukraine or not. You can find plenty of articles attacking AOC, for example, for saying that she doesn't think that the United States should just like flat out strip assets from Russian oligarchs that are held in the United States, because she thinks that it might be a constitutional issue. What I'm saying is that like there's plenty of criticism of AOC, coming from people who really are wanting to ratchet up, conflict and war and the severity of it, which makes me feel when I see this like it being one extremely one-sided. And I think the claim that AOC in particular is throttling us, has her foot on the gas pedal to a World War III or the third nuclear war, or whatever framing it as, is completely ludicrous. And again, like, I don't want to be dismissive of people who want to have real conversations about holding left-wing, like elected representatives accountable. But I'm sorry, I can't help but question the motives of folks who are doing this in support of Tulsi Gabbard, somebody who is oftentimes presented as somebody who's anti-war, but they never pay attention to what Tulsi says. Tulsi wasn't anti-war. She just thought we weren't waging the war against quote-unquote radical Islam in the most efficient way.
I mean, people, I think often forget this, but before she ran for president, I mean, it's funny now she's back on Fox News all the time, but before she ran for president, like back in the Obama years, she used, like, there was a point where she was the person who's a Democratic congresswoman who would go on Fox to get mad at President Obama for not saying the magical words radical Islamic extremism, because apparently if you said that would help it defeat it.
She just got back from a deployment with the United States military. Like, what the fuck? Like, I'm sorry. Like, that's like, it's just like, what you're laying at the feet of AOC, like you are accelerating your claims. Like you're saying, okay, support for an aid package here that had money. I'm not saying that's not a big issue, but had some money that went to the Ukrainian military, right? One thing, debate that. But then you're not anti-war like Tulsi Gabbard, who's literally with the United States military right now, like doing operation. Like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, if you're trying to make this principled lefty argument about who's good and who's bad, I don't know.
It's very, very silly. Like, and I do think, I am somebody who, I worry a lot about escalation with Russia and the possibility of the conflict going nuclear. I think that's like a very real concern. But and I'm in favor. I think what Russia's done is inexcusable. But I'm still in favor of de-escalation and diplomacy. And I've written a lot about it, and frankly, taken a lot of flack about it. Right? I'm pretty sure there are people who think the show is being funded in rubles. Let's put it that way, right? But I think, but there's a world of difference between that, right? Saying like, we should be worried about what's going to happen if the conflict goes on. We should be looking for off ramps and way to de-escalate and negotiate to the extent that's still possible. And even saying, look, maybe you can argue that like the most recent aid package, that like maybe they should have voted against that, or at least made it conditional on, on some sort of like accompanying diplomatic moves. I think those are all reasonable arguments to have. But also, like, one, just chill. The votes on that aid package, that was not close. Let's put it that way, right? Like that was like nearly unanimous. And so I don't, it was bad enough when people were saying AOC is standing between us and healthcare. I really don't think that AOC is being consulted on, whether to, as Kanye would put it, go to DEFCON 3 with Russia. I don't think she's doing that. I think there are plenty of legitimate reasons to, she's a politician, she's got flaws. I have objections about both sort of communication strategy and sometimes votes. And I think those are absolutely discussions to have and hash out. But I also think there's something about her in particular, as opposed to other elected left-wing politicians, that seems to bring out lunatics and just get them frothing at the mouth. I don't think you have to be Sigmund Freud to, have some idea of what it might be. But also, Tulsi fucking Gabbard.
Yeah, it's just that's the thing. Like, I'm sorry, that's how you can tell that this is an op. And honestly, again, like you get people who are out there. I've interacted with them on Twitter, which we know is like not the best sample size for reasonable people, but they'll say things like, as I was saying earlier, like, oh well, if somebody's saying anti-war, I support them wholeheartedly. I say, look, there are lots of people who are arguing for de-escalation, and it's amazing which things get picked up and which things don't get picked up when we're having those conversations. But even more broadly, when it comes to the fact that this is very clearly an attempt to try to create some movement for Tulsi Gabbard's rebrand, you have to start to wonder why it is being framed in that way. Like, I can't, like, even if, like, let's just imagine alternate universe and our comrade, like, Cale Brooks is in the United States Congress and is just, like, being, like, the #1 de-escalation voice. If I were confronting an AOC for something other than this, right, over things that I disagreed with her, it would take a little bit of, like, preparation for me to think to, like, start bringing up this other character in the conversation. And the fact that both of the folks who prepped this and went into it made a point of bringing up Tulsi Gabbard should help you understand that they knew that they were very smart in the sense that they knew that this was going to get picked up. They knew that this was going to be on Tucker Carlson, which is this entire media strategy of, like, I don't know where to put these folks yet. in like the general constellation of U.S. politics. But there certainly is this kind of like, I don't want to call them left, but they're like left adjacent in the sense of like they're getting mad about things that are being written in Jacobin. They're getting mad about things that are getting written in the New Left Review, right? Like they're swimming in the same waters to a certain extent. And they're making a plan to make interventions. Like, again, if you want to talk about somebody who wants, who's been advocating for de-escalation, why bring up Tulsi Gabbard? Why not bring up somebody like Veronica Marshall-Teach? You know, it's taking incredible amounts of flack, and say, like, why not follow principled voices like him or principled voices like Chomsky, et cetera, et cetera. Again, because like the accusations are outlandish that AOC has her foot on the gas pedal, leading us to nuclear annihilation, instead of the president of the United States. Like all these other people who are like playing this game, and two, like trying to launder the political career of somebody who's shown to be just a complete loser. And I'm talking about Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah, or also you could bring up Noam Chomsky, or who advocated peace talks back in February is Bernie Sanders, who's actually the candidate that
or Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah, Jeremy Corbyn, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, I, as people may remember, recently had the bizarre experience of sharing a stage with Tulsi Gabbard. And I would say I debated Tulsi Gabbard, but I really didn't. I sort of debated some other people while she was there. She didn't really participate very much in that conversation. But leading up to it, because I thought I was going to be arguing with her more than I did, I spent a fair amount of time looking into her, and it seems like she's riding some pretty sketchy culture war trains lately, to put it mildly. And also, like, okay, she's anti-war. Like, look, she's not leaving the Democratic Party for the PSL, right? Like she's leaving the Democratic Party for the GOP, which I've got to say is not a famously anti-war organization. So I think that this is like, actually we're about to bring on Anna Kasparian in a minute, who I think called this probably earlier than anybody did. But I mean, it just seems like Tulsi Gabbard is maybe somebody who at various points advocated a few left-wing views. But if I were gonna, if I were going to go around shrilly denouncing people for failing to live up to some sort of left or progressive ideals, I think she's not the person I would pick to contrast them with.
I'm sorry, I have no patience for this kind of stuff, because the same people who are attacking Bernie Sanders, AOC, and the squad at large, because they didn't, quote unquote, force the vote. They turned their back on Medicare for all because it's politically expedient. And turning their backs, it's like Tulsi Gabbard, true socialist Tulsi Gabbard, who dropped Medicare for all from her presidential campaign the second she thought it was politically expedient. This is an insane double standard. It's just like, it's absolutely ridiculous to make the arguments like we're going to defend the principled lefties, the principled people. When if you are a believer in Tulsi Gabbard, if you think Tulsi Gabbard is like the vanguard of some kind of progressive democratic socialist or even just socialist, right? Like movement, look at what Tulsi Gabbard has done anytime she hits a wall. She immediately has dropped all these kind of positions that some people, praise her for and attribute toward her. And like the Medicare for all one, I mean, that's a big deal to drop that in a presidential election. I mean, you're running for the highest office in the United States government. You're basically saying like, yeah, I don't think we're going to do that this time. Like, that's a little bit different than somebody who continues to support Medicare for all saying, I don't think that we're going to be able to be successful doing some kind of last minute parliamentary move to somehow get a losing vote for Medicare for all on the floor in Congress, right? Very, very different conversations when it comes to turning your back on that platform.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, this is like, and the fact that people, I mean, whatever, it is such a caricature of what a leftist would be like for people to still be upset about a proposed parliamentary tactic that like was suggested to be used 2 years ago that didn't even happen. And whether you think that hypothetical parliamentary tactic was a good idea or not, right? I mean, like that. This is like, man, you think about the things that like people, had big like faction fights about in the past, your sort of, reform versus revolution, and, should socialists support World War I or not? And, Trotsky, Stalin, it's like, yeah, whether some social democrats should have used one particular parliamentary tactic 2 years ago.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's can I just say something like really broadly about this? Because like this again, I think this is predominantly still like a very online formation, but it's popping up more and more. I don't think it's enough to wield power, but like think about the way to engage it. So drop the Ukraine stuff for a second. These folks are also pushing some other things. I don't agree with like the framing, but like in the general sense of like pushing back, like the LaRouche people are pushing back against and pushing for some things that like so like I'm a big supporter of nuclear power. I think nuclear power is one of like the best technologies we have in front of us to decarbonize and to provide a future of like abundance and a good life for people, compared to the Macrons and like the people who are, there's a center left movement right now that's very happy to attach itself to environmentalists and Greens who are saying what you actually need is like austerity, what y'all need is less, and we'll give it to you, right? They're very happy to be able to rebrand austerity for the future. I bring that up to say that like a lot of these same characters who are boosting this AOC attack are making those kind of arguments, but with a lot more reactionary and nonsensical baggage, right? I'm saying all this to say that like it is important to be principled and to recognize when people who might even be sort of pushing back against figures who you might disagree with are not your friends, right? Like what the LaRouche people want for the future is not a future that I want to be living in. And even when they push back against a degrowther who I might not like, I'm not somebody who's going to be like, oh, well, the enemy of my enemy is my friend on this, because you have to realize where they are coming from. I mean, it goes back to like, should the left, which has always been a nonsensical argument, but like, should the left align itself with like anti-establishment pro-Trump people? No. And in the same way, when you see this like LaRouche movement, which is, again, I think very marginal still, but they're getting a decent amount of media attention for how small they are.
Yeah.
You should take that to all aspects of politics.
No, for sure. And I will say this is the last thing before I bring on Anna. And if it's okay, by the way, if you can stick around for the first few minutes of Anna, there's something I want to show both of you. But last thing I think I'd say before bringing on Anna is just this, that, because I know some people will be under, it's like, okay, why are we showing this, right? Like, who cares? Like, why do we, these are obviously crazy people, right? Why is this, why is this even worth the discussion? And I think it's to push back against that precise thing that you talked about, right? Because like a lot of the defense of this, like you said, is, oh, well, I don't care who they are, right? Because they're making good points, which, I think they're sort of making an incoherent version of something that like half of it might be a good point, but like, but forget that for a second. Like, also, no, you should apply some more discernment than that, right? You shouldn't just say, like, anybody who's yelling at people who we have criticisms of is therefore, on the team or something like that. That's a horrible counterproductive way to do politics.
Alex Jones talks shit about the banks sometimes.
Yeah, Alex Jones does talk shit about the banks. And shit should be talked about the banks. Yet Alex Jones is not an ally of the left. This is not hard. And I think it's worth sort of highlighting the difference between the version of a critique that might get a lot of play and the version that makes any sense. And I think that is actually something that's worth doing and spending a minute to do. You have been watching free public content from Give Them an Argument. To access every single episode of the show, the main show on Monday nights, all of the streams, all of the debate breakdowns, all of the patron-exclusive postgames on Monday nights, all of the patron-exclusive bonus episodes every week, and much, much more, go to patreon.com/Ben Burgis. I cannot resist ending this with, don't be foolish.